Hello, welcome to the Tenement Museum. Welcome to today's program from Orchard to Essex, Street Peddlers and Market Vendors. We are so glad you could join us this afternoon. My name is Dolan Cochran, and I am a lead educator for specialty programs at the museum. For those of you joining us today who are unfamiliar with the Tenement Museum, we are a history museum that tells the story of immigrants, migrants, and refugees who found a home in the Lower East Side neighborhood of Manhattan. Today, we're really happy to welcome Cindy Vanden Bosch and Andrew Gustafson, who are joining us from Turnstile Tours. So let's just say hi to them real quick. So hi guys, thank you so much for joining us. Turnstile Tours is a social enterprise that works in partnership with nonprofit organizations and small businesses to design and operate tours and public programs that explore how New York City works. They especially emphasize sharing stories of the ordinary people that have made the city what it is today. Today, Cindy and Andrew will be sharing some of the research their team has done about the history of the Essex Street Market, with a focus on how the market was established and the story of vendors from the early years. During the second half of today's program, we're going to shift gears from the past to the present and broadcast live to the market. From there, we'll be joined by staff from the New York City Economic Development Corporation, which is the nonprofit that operates Essex Market. We'll also hear from several market vendors that are operating to help feed the city during this time. Today's program in total will last about an hour. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions for any of us or any of the market vendors, please feel free to post them in the comments section throughout the program. We will try to get to as many as we can. Now, before we turn things over to Cindy and Andrew, I'd like to begin with the story of Max Marcus, whose own career as a salesman in the Lower East Side began in the basement of our museum's historic tenement apartment building at 97 Orchard Street. You'll be seeing the facade of this building as we speak. He was running his business in the bottom left-hand corner from your screen, one of the basement shops. Eventually, his career would span several decades. And we feature Max's story on our Shop Life tour because it's a really great example of how important commercial life is to the community of the neighborhood, and also the many unique challenges that business owners have faced over the years in the Lower East Side. So Max Marcus was born on March 25th of 1910. He was actually born right across the street from the building you're seeing. He was born at 94 Orchard, the fifth of 8 children born to Ada and Adolf Marcus, who were Austrian Jewish immigrants. He was the first of their children born in the US. His own parents were deeply involved in local business community. His father worked in several restaurants as a chef and a waiter before eventually opening up his own restaurant on Broome Street. Max's mother, Ada, worked at home as a dressmaker to help support the family. And Max's own career in local businesses actually began very early when he was in elementary school. The photo you're seeing right now is him at the age of 13. This was a photo for his bar mitzvah. So if you can imagine him a few years prior to this, he was attending elementary school at PS 137. It's now the site of PS 42, not too far from the museum. He did not take to school very well, according to his family. He was always skipping classes, getting caught, and getting in trouble with his teachers. At one point, he allegedly snuck out a window and down a fire escape to get out of a music lesson that his parents had arranged for him. So this all troubled his mother. She thought he was going to turn to a life of crime. So to remedy the situation, she took a trip across the street to visit her friend William Scher, who ran a general goods auction house at 97 Orchard Street. And she begged him to take Max on as an apprentice. Some versions of the story go so far as to say that she even offered to pay him to take him on in the business. Either way, according to Max, he started working for him in the 2nd or 3rd grade, doing simple jobs, stacking boxes, making deliveries, things like that. But the new position really stuck. He remained working for Willie Scher for many years, even after the family departed the Lower East Side and moved to Williamsburg. This was a pretty common relationship. Many families were leaving the neighborhood at the time, settling in the outer boroughs, but were returning to do their shopping and to work at businesses that had been established in the neighborhood. By 1930, Max had worked his way up to a position as salesman at Willie Scher's auction house, and later that year he got married. The photo you're seeing right now is on his wedding day. That is his wife, Pauline Bloom. Apparently, this wedding caused a little bit of controversy in the family. His parents approved of her, but wanted him to wait until his older sisters were married first. But Max still had a little bit of that rebellious streak and decided just to elope. They got married at a nearby synagogue. A few years after this, in the mid to late 1930s, Max's boss left the neighborhood. He established a manufacturing business near Union Square, and he gave his Orchard Street business to Max. In an interview, this is how Max described the exchange. He says, quote, Willie came up to me and said, Max, this is yours. If you need any merchandise, call me up. I'll send you more goods. You helped me so many years. You're a nice guy. I'm giving it all to you, no charge. And he gave me the whole store with merchandise without a nickel, end quote. And the photo you're now seeing is Max now running the business. And he is farthest to the left with that distinctive mustache you might have noticed in the wedding photo. What's really interesting to me about this picture, you can see how crowded his business is. And this photo was actually taken during the Depression. So when many businesses were faltering or failing, Max had found a way to survive and even thrive. Now, to him, a big part of that success story was another very important commercial institution in the Lower East Side, which were the pushcart markets. Max described Orchard Street growing up as being absolutely packed with these small vendors from Houston to Canal, loudly, energetically, sometimes forcefully hawking their wares. And you could get anything, food, produce, clothing, home goods, anything you need at the pushcart markets. So Max tapped into this market. He had a pushcart that he put right outside the doorway to his brick and mortar storefront. He also ran 2 small stalls on either side of the stoop at 97 Orchard Street. And in this way, he would attract pedestrians, then he could talk to them and bring them into his shop, into the auction house. And this culture would change pretty dramatically in 1939. This is when Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia would ban pushcarts in the city, ostensibly to clean up and modernize the city. Cindy and Andrew will be talking more about that in just a little bit. Max correctly intuited that this would negatively impact his business to a significant degree. And he knew that the solution LaGuardia proposed was building massive indoor markets around the city. So Max applied to be a vendor at the Essex Street Market that was under construction in 1939. And he described his decision in the following quote. I moved to Essex Street when it opened because they took the pushcarts away. People didn't come around like they used to. I figured once they took the pushcarts, wouldn't bring in the customers. And once the pushcarts went away, businesses would die out. So Max moved to the market when it opened in 1940. According to him, he got a stall in the market because they knew he was a hustler that would bring in customers. When he first moved in, he opened a home goods store and a furniture store. Rent for a stall was $4.75 a week when he started. And he started what would be an almost 50-year career at the market. He was able to maintain his success despite many personal and professional changes that he experienced. I think the decade of the 1970s really illustrates this. Early 70s, he loses his wife after 41 years of marriage. The neighborhood had changed. The businesses that were opening around him were drastically different and really reflective of the different demographics in the Lower East Side at the time, which was largely Spanish-speaking immigrants and migrants. So as that new community grew, a very particular kind of business developed. He began to see botanicas opening in and around the market. These are businesses that sell religious goods and services like candles and books and things like that. And they're an extremely important part of the fabric of many Spanish-speaking communities in the US. So he realized that they did a lively trade and had a lot of repeat customers. He decided to open up a botanica of his own. And he did so with the help of his friends. And in this picture you're seeing right now, this is Max and Luisa Orta. And Luisa from Puerto Rico moved to the Lower East Side and was a vendor in the Essex Street Market. In 1978, they opened a botanica together, and they also began a romantic relationship. Max's granddaughter, Carol, remembers them working very closely together running the shop. And she also remembers that when she graduated high school, Max and Luisa took her on a trip to Puerto Rico to celebrate. When Max passed away in March 25th of 1988, he left all of his businesses to Luisa. At the height of his business career in the market, he had 13 different stalls. And his son-in-law, Gene, claims that he was the second largest distributor of candles in New York City. However, he is most remembered by his many customers and his fellow vendors as the honorific he earned over those decades, which was mayor of the Lower East Side. So we really love telling that story because it's such a great example of the complexity of commercial life in the neighborhood, how it evolves, how it responds to these giant challenges. And so from now on, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy and Andrew.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us here on the program today. We are so grateful to be here to share the history, sort of the foundational history of the Essex Street Market and some of those early vendor stories. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when the Essex Street Market was originally constructed in 1940, it was part of a broader effort all across the city of New York to open up enclosed markets and places where there had been these outdoor kind of pushcart markets. And so that's something we're going to give a little bit of that historical context as part of our initial introductory talk today, as well as some of the vendor stories.
Yeah, so Max is a great example of sort of going from Orchard to Essex for one person, and we're going to kind of look at the broader context of that and also zoom in on some of the other vendors that were inside the market in the early days.
And then we're going to transition after that, maybe the most exciting part.
Well, we're actually going to get to go
live
to
the Essex Market and meet some of the vendors there today, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, so we're just going to show some pictures just to give you a sense of kind of what the what the Lower East Side, what the streetscape was like. So here, for example, is a roast corn vendor. As Dolan mentioned, you could find fresh food, prepared food, produce, home goods, clothing sold on the street. This is a pretty common sight. These sort of little makeshift ovens that were going around roasting corn, roasting nuts, roasting potatoes was very common. And then you'd also have these produce stands and a lot of also what Dolan mentioned, which was these stoop line stands that you would find and so it wasn't just these itinerant peddlers coming up, but you would also find the brick and mortar businesses would utilize the sidewalk scape as well.
That's right. And in the neighborhood on the Lower East Side, really leading up to this time, open air markets would have been in places like Hester Street, Rivington Street, Grand had its own, Pike, and of course the largest of all of them was on Orchard Street.
Yeah, so I mean, we've had itinerant pushcart peddlers in New York City since the 17th century, but it's really in the 1880s where we see them start to get organized. And then in the 19-teens, the city kind of gets involved and they create these official open air pushcart markets. And so this is a map from 1923 that shows where some of those concentrations were. And so obviously you can see on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, that there's a pretty heavy concentration down there, but also up here at East Harlem. And you also actually, it's a little bit off the map here, down in Brooklyn as well, and then up in the Bronx. And these actually map pretty well to where in the following decade, we would see these enclosed markets come into play. And so this is something that Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia campaigned on. And when he became mayor in 1934, he really made a promise to what he felt was rationalize the city's food distribution system. So it wasn't just the pushcart peddlers, it wasn't just retail markets, but it was the wholesale market system. It was the city's cold chain, the refrigeration, that wholesale distribution of food that he really wanted to modernize. And so we talk a lot about the pushcart peddlers and his so-called war on pushcarts, but that was just one part of his overall kind of food strategy.
And so, as Mayor LaGuardia, every time that a public market opened, his sort of mantra was that they were taking the peddlers from yesterday and turning them into the merchants of tomorrow. And in many ways, it played out in the press that way. But there was also some press coverage. Not every merchant, you could say, on the Lower East Side, for example, was necessarily in support in those early years of opening Essex Street Market and banning the pushcart peddlers from Orchard Street. So one such person was Saul Moscott, This is a business, actually. They're in the 5th generation of business on the Lower East Side. Even still today, they're a neighbor of the Tenement Museum. But Sol Mascot, his father, Hyman, had come over in the late 1890s. They were an Eastern European family. And his father had actually sold eyeglasses as a pushcart peddler, but then was able to open up a store, and they moved to a couple of different locations. This was their longtime location for almost 8 decades at 118 Orchard Street, kind of catty corner from where they are today. But he was really in support of keeping the vendors on Orchard Street. And one thing that he said was, Orchard Street is like a magnet for all. And many times I've sold eyeglasses to people who came down to buy from the pushcarts. This here is Hyman, his father. And at an East Side Chamber of Commerce meeting in May of 1939, there were storekeepers, property owners, and local politicians that asserted that it would be a terrible blow for Orchard Street to lose the glamour of the pushcart trade.
Yeah, and I think this really complicates this typical narrative that we get that, brick and mortar store owners and pushcart peddlers, must be in opposition. They can't have, aligning interests. And we see that today as well, all restaurants, must hate all the food carts. But in reality, we see that these pushcart peddlers or the food carts today, they bring a lot of energy. They bring, foot traffic out onto the street, and they're not necessarily direct competitors either.
Well, and sometimes they bring money. So
Yeah.
if we look at this photograph, this is of Orchard Street just shortly before
Thanksgiving.
right around Thanksgiving time, we can see the turkey. But you can also see that there's a light that's sort of dangling there. And in fact, pushcart peddlers on Orchard Street would pay for electricity from the local stores in order to do nighttime vending. And you could see this woman in a fancy coat kind of walking down the street. So it was this sort of bustling street life. And so it is the fact that when you open these enclosed markets, that there's this nervous anticipation on the part of these merchants. We can see in this next photograph here, also around Thanksgiving time on the same day. Here again, we've got some push carts out in front of these storefronts, and you can see how the foot traffic would have really been mutually beneficial both to the peddlers as well as to the merchants.
And again, you can see people in suits and nice hats as well. So, people from all over New York City knew that this was the place to come to get deals. And even in times of crisis, World War I, World War II, people would come from all over the city because it was these pushcart peddlers and these public markets where they had the best deals. They were actually very efficient at getting affordable food into these really densely populated neighborhoods. And so again, this is kind of the narrative at the time, which was that, this is the kind of the old ways that we want to sweep away, not just to make them more, make the streets and our food system more sanitary, but also, in the 30s, we really have the rise of the automobile. And so this idea that the streets of New York City are not for people, they are for cars. And so the creation of the public markets, really, played into that as well. So this is kind of looking back at 1933 on Orchard Street.
And we also have the World's Fair, and LaGuardia wants to present this modern city. So all of this is kind of a confluence of factors that bring us up to the opening of Essex Street Market.
And of course, they gleefully reported this, that just the day that the Essex Street Market opens, right around the corner, they set up basically a junkyard where they're hacking all the old wooden push carts to pieces for firewood. And then this is from opening day in the New York Times. And again, the headline is all about the war on push carts. And so here is the original Essex Street Market. It was actually a series of 4 buildings. If you were there up until a year ago yesterday, you were really just in the southernmost section, the southernmost building. Over the years, it was consolidated into one building. But this is kind of what the food system looked like. So 1934, we don't have any enclosed public markets. We have 56 open-air pushcart markets, over 4,000 permits for these open-air pushcart markets. And then you have these 7,000 itinerant licenses. So these were people who would go, they were not in a sort of fixed location.
It's your Iceman, you're a milk peddler, that sort of thing.
Yep. And so then by 1942, They've opened 42, they've opened 9 enclosed public markets. There's still open air pushcart markets, but there's just 15. And there's 821 open air permits and less than 1,800 enclosed market stalls in total. So you go from, so basically on the left, you go from over 11,000 peddler permits to, on the right, between the enclosed markets and the open air markets, you have like 4,500. So it's a significant decline. Even if we just look at Orchard Street, just the Orchard Street open air market had close to 1,000 vendors, but it's replaced by a market that only has 475 stalls. So there is not space for everyone here.
And that's an interesting point, because in the early years, if you wanted to apply to be a vendor, you had to be a US citizen or you had to show naturalization papers. So there were certain requirements that made it so that there were certain people at the tail end of the Depression that would have maybe struggled to gain access to those initial permits. And
they also kind of restricted what you could sell as well. So, the focus, like I said, was really on the food system. So they tried to limit the number of merchandise vendors that were there as well. People like Max were actually in the minority of vendors. But this is just a rundown of the first 10, the 10 markets that were sort of conceived under LaGuardia. We have them all, 9 of them built before 1942, and then the Harlem market kind of gets delayed, so it's not built until 1955.
And just to clarify, it's not the Park Avenue retail market.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one built is in East Harlem. The last one built is in Central Harlem. And then you can see on the right, the ones that are still open today: La Marqueta, Park Avenue Retail Market, the 13th Avenue Market in Borough Park, Brooklyn, the Essex, now called the Essex Market, which we'll talk about, Arthur Avenue Market, and the Moore Street Market in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
So who were the vendors? What was it like to step inside Essex Street Market on that opening day on July 9th, 1940?
January 9th.
What did I say?
July.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yes, January 9th. So on January 9th, 1940, if you would have stepped inside, of course, there would have been hundreds and hundreds of vendors. Most of them would have been of Jewish background, about 70%, 20% Italian, and then 10% from other backgrounds. Stepping inside, you would have, we have a great description here from the Works Progress Administration, from a writer in that time, who says that it's really interesting because the way that the vendors are organized. There's a cheese vendor right next to a shoe repair person, and then a dealer in antiques next to a vegetable vendor. And then in terms of food that you might find inside stalls, appetizing herring, colorful pickling spices, delicious seed-sprinkled Bialystoker Kuchen, Romanian egg pretzels to meet any purse. So just a lot of different flavors there, all kinds of kosher foods, but there wasn't just kosher food to serve people in the neighborhood. You had anything from smoked fish to red herrings with tomato sauce. This is making me so hungry. But there was also macaroni, spaghetti, plain American cheese, cottage cheese made from sweet cream. So you've got all of these different kinds of foods. We have, very limited pictures of who the vendors were, but we do have information about them. So we're looking at this slide here. This was Allegra and Morta Morhain. And we see that, so this is taken in 1942, and they were in the news because they had won a competition that the Department of Markets had put out. It was called the Silver Cup for the best display in the entire market. So you can see them proudly holding their cup. And he was an immigrant from Turkey. She was originally from Greece. They came over at the same time as, around the same time period when you have this huge migration during the Balkan Wars, right around when the Confinos actually come over. They list on the census that they speak Ladino. So that they speak Spanish, which we assume to be Ladino. And so this is an example of a couple. They lived in the neighborhood really since 1920 and were peddlers throughout that time. And so there were other people that had been peddlers before, like Esther, who we just saw in the photograph before. She had been a peddler for 35 years. Hannah Cohen was another person whose photograph we don't have, who had sold cheese on the street before she entered the market. But then there were also other people like Max, who we heard about earlier, who had been a merchant. And so an example of that is Helen and Leo Jutkowitz, who had their own shop on Orchard Street selling all kinds of dairy products, and they decide to move into the market, and they would be there longer than 25 years.
Yeah, and I'll just love to show this image. Just by the way, if people don't know who the Confinos are, they were residents of 97 yes. Orchard Street who are, part of the story of the Tenement Museum. But I just love this because it really highlights how the markets were not just, created as sort of shopping centers. They were a place to really serve the community. And this was an example. They did canning workshops and during World War II to teach people, how to stretch their ration cards. And that's something that we'll talk about later on, how it really is still a major service to the community.
Yeah, you could have gone into the markets back. That's just like, they were an important resource, even though there was sort of this contentious kind of situation as the market was opening in the neighborhood. It was still a place where you could go, and there were so many important resources that would help you kind of navigate whether it was rations or learn cooking skills. There was a kosher cooking school there for almost more than 30 years.
Yeah.
So an important resource.
And the city had a whole information service. They would go on WNYC almost every day to report on, what was fresh and what the prices were, because again, the public retail markets were a way to, again, provide fresh, affordable food and also, not have people be subject to, just buying from a handful of large retailers that could set prices. So that was a big challenge, especially in the 30s and 40s.
And for over 30 years, a woman named Frances Foley Gannon, who worked for the city, was the one whose voice you'd hear on the radio talking about what was available at the public market.
And I just want to mention this because this is one of the best known vendors. He was there, Julius the Candy King, for over 45 years. Well, we're not sure exactly what year he entered the market, but he's there by 1943 and is there, into the early 90s. So this, really, again, an institution at the Essex Street Market.
And what's interesting, so now we're going to shift gears, but I just want to say that, we all know that the peddlers didn't necessarily totally go away. So we ended up with both the markets and also after the war, especially street vendors still out on the streets, which we still have today. So now we have both.
Yeah.
So here we are. We're going to now shift gears. We've been looking at the history. And we're now going to go into what is the new Essex Market. So just yesterday was the anniversary of the opening of the market in its new location. And so we're going to learn more from the staff at the actual Essex Market. We're going to broadcast live there now and invite our colleagues. So first we're going to hear from Adam Schneider, and then we'll be joined in just a little bit by Lauren Margulis. Adam, thank you so much for joining us for this program today and making it possible for us to virtually tour and visit the market.
Of course, we're thrilled to have you guys on.
So as market manager at the Essex Market, could you share a little bit more about what your work is today and what the mission of the Essex Market is now and sort of how that compares to what it's kind of always been?
Sure. So I oversee the day-to-day operations of the market. I handle vendor relations and I coordinate marketing and programming efforts with Lauren and the rest of the Lower East Side bid team. As you guys mentioned, Essex is one of 6 current public markets in the New York the EDC Public Market Network. And we are committed to providing fresh and affordable food to the community. And we have been for the last 80 years, whether it was in the space across the street or the space here. And ironically enough, my grandmother was a docent at the Tenement Museum. So it's kind of funny that I run Essex and she used to work at the museum. So it's kind of like a funny family connection.
Everything's coming together.
Yeah.
So, this is a very difficult time for so many of us in New York City. I mean, it's sort of history in the making in this moment. And one of the most stressful things, I think, for many of us is going out shopping for food. And I know that you've put all kinds of measures in place to ensure that both the small business vendors that are in the market as well as customers can be safe with their shopping experience and get the food they need. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. I mean, as far as our COVID response, our customer and staff safety is our primary concern. And we've done like a variety of things. One, we put these cool floor decals everywhere. And Lauren will show you those as she goes around the market. That helps, for social distancing reminders. We have increased security that help people queue when they get into stalls and making sure that everyone maintains the proper distance. We have regular announcements that are in Spanish and English, which we may or may not hear one depending on what time that happens. Just again, reminding people to maintain their distance. We have senior hours every day, Monday through Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. for seniors and those at risk, just so they feel more comfortable coming to a space with less people. We have, hand sanitizer stations at every entrance. Everyone is required to wear a mask, whether you're a customer or a staff member or a shopper. And we have also reduced the overall hours of the market. We're 8 to 6 Monday through Saturday and 10 to 6 on Saturdays. And that was we let the vendors choose. It was how they felt safe, getting their staff home safely, and that's what they agreed on. And we said, you know what, that's our concern, is making sure that you feel comfortable, and that's our primary goal. And we've also, and Lauren will talk about this a little bit more as well, but we're on Mercado, the grocery delivery platform, and that allows people who are worried about going outside or worried to come in the market. They can order from almost all the vendors online and have their groceries delivered to them at home. And a lot of our population is low to moderate income, and so many of our vendors take EBT, and that allows the community to stay fed and keep that fresh and affordable mission going.
Yeah, it's so important. And I mean, part of what you do as well is really make spaces for small mom and pop businesses from all different kinds of cultural backgrounds, giving them the opportunity to be in a space and start and grow their businesses. Could you tell us, just before we step out into the market with Lauren, could you tell us a little bit more of the makeup of vendors? How many are in the market approximately? What kinds of backgrounds they come from?
Of course. So we have 36 vendors total. Not all of them are open right now just due to the pandemic, but we have 36 total. 60% of that is provisional. Most of them are all from the Lower East Side, grew up in the Lower East Side. We have 21 came from the old market over here, all except for one who retired. Everyone from the old market came over. We outfitted the stalls for them. We kept the price per square foot the same so that, this is a flashier building, but we didn't want them to feel priced out. New York real estate is exceedingly expensive, and everybody knows that. So we really want to foster these small businesses and, these micro business so that they can grow and support their families. And this is their main lifeline and revenue stream. And it's our mission at EDC to make sure that they can provide, and they can provide a service to themselves and their family and the community.
And you had almost no downtime, right, between the move from the old market to the new one?
No, we closed, we basically, as I said, this is their revenue stream. So we closed the old market, and 4 days later, we soft opened here. We wanted them to minimize the smallest amount of time possible. And, opening one restaurant is hard enough, but opening 35 small businesses or 36 in one shot was an undertaking. But we have an amazing team, myself, Lauren, and the rest of the bid and the rest of EDC that was able to do that. And you guys were here on the opening. It was like such an exciting time. And yesterday it's bittersweet that the time we're in right now, but it still is. We're still so happy and so thankful to be in this facility, and so are the vendors.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. And we're actually going to bring back Adam again at the end if anybody has any more questions about the Essex Market more broadly. But at this point, we'd like to invite Lauren to join us on the program. She oversees community programming and public engagement inside the market. You can see she's wearing a mask, much like many of the other vendors that we're going to be seeing today, because they're taking all the precautions necessary to ensure health and safety. Lauren, it's great to see you. Could you please tell us a little bit about your role, and especially your recent efforts to start a fundraiser to help really people that maybe can't afford to buy groceries right now, who live in the Lower East Side?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So you can see I'm here on the market floor. We have our historic sign from one of the original Essex Market buildings right behind me there. So I host all the community programming and events that used to take place at Essex Market. We have a beautiful demonstration kitchen that we filled with lots of different types of programs and classes for the community. Really, our spotlight program was Fresh Bites, which was a free cooking and nutrition program for anyone to attend, but a large number of our participants were seniors. And those folks really came to depend on a coupon service that we had. So when you came to class, you got a voucher where you could buy fresh fruits and vegetables. So we really wanted to continue that effort. So we've launched a fundraiser that anyone can donate to. And this is going to allow us to do deliveries of fresh fruits and vegetables to homebound seniors and other at-risk families in the Lower East Side. The need is so great down here. There's a lot of services happening, but we've heard that really the produce is something that's missing for folks. So we worked with let's do the announcement.
Yeah. So this is the announcement about social distancing and being mindful of that when you're shopping. It's going to be in English and then in Spanish. This is kind of part of, a virtual visit to the market. We're in this active market space. And so there may be things unpredictable that happen in our virtual tour today, much like the tours that we did in person.
Right.
When we're at the Essex Market otherwise. So we may see that some of the vendors have to help customers and may need to step away for a second. And that's just what it means to be a small business owner running your stall in the market.
So to wrap that up, we worked with an artist friend of ours, Massimo, and he created this custom art. So if anyone would like to, you can purchase one of these custom t-shirts or tote bags, and half of the amount go to our proceeds for our fundraiser. And, we're hoping to drop off many more pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables to our shoppers in this neighborhood that can't join us in person.
Right. That's so great. Thank you so much for your generosity and for sharing that with us today. Lauren is going to be now behind the camera, and she's going to make her way over to the first stall that we're going to visit. We're going down to New Starfish. We're passing, this is Essex Farms. So this is a grocer that's based in the market. And we're making our way down to two different businesses that are right next to each other and share many of the same customers. If possible, we're going to go first to New Starfish, where the business that really now at this point has been in the market longer, I think, than any other business.
Yeah, 27 years.
Yeah, dating back to 1993, I believe. So Eric, hopefully we'll have the chance to speak with him in just a few minutes. We can see all of their delicious fish that's on display in the case here.
And while we're waiting for Eric, I just thought I would mention, the fact that, we talked before about how the creation of the public markets was in connection with, improving the wholesale markets as well. And those systems are still interconnected. So, this is a fish market that gets all their fish directly from the country's largest wholesale fish market, which is up at Hunts Point, the new Fulton Fish Market in the Bronx. And so a lot of the vendors, they get that directly from, those big, those food distributors and those wholesalers up at Hunts Point, not just fish, but produce and some processed goods and things like that.
So I see that we have Eric here, and here he comes around. Okay, great. Eric was one of the people who spoke at the opening last year, a real heartfelt speech. And Eric has really grown up in the market because of the family-owned business. Eric, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you, Cindy?
It's good to see you.
You too.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your parents ended up opening the stall? Give us a little bit of background on how they ended up at the Essex Street Market.
Yeah, of course. So my parents originally had their first fish market in Connecticut, and we were there for probably 5 years before a big supermarket chain came and took out a lot of the small businesses in the local area. And so my dad decided to open up shop inside the Essex Market in the Lower East Side, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, and who are your customers, and kind of how have has that changed over time? And how has that changed the selection of fish that you've had over time?
Yeah, I mean, over the course of, 2 decades, the neighborhood of the Lower East Side has changed a lot, and I've adjusted my inventory to accommodate for the growing neighborhood. And so it was originally just us helping the Lower East Side, but it's eventually expanded from the Soho and now Chinatown, and then the East Village also. And we also deal to a lot of the local restaurants.
Right. You do have chefs that love you. You guys have been doing this and have such good relationships up at the Fulton Fish Market that you really know fish.
Yes.
And you yourself, having grown up in the business, also decided to go and get your culinary degree from the French Culinary Institute. And so if anybody has any fish questions, now's the time. I don't know if we don't have any questions yet. If you have any recommendations of a way to prepare one of the selections of fish that you have in the case.
Sure. I personally love fish with the skin on. And so my personal favorite way to prepare fish is just to sear it on a pan, do most of the cooking time on the skin, get it nice and crispy. And some of the fishes that I like to eat the most of are like steelhead trout. I also love to eat diver scallops and things like porgies and whitings I eat quite often also.
Yeah. I've really appreciated all of your advice and guidance in preparing all the fish that I've bought with you through the years.
Yeah.
We're actually, our mission right now is to try to, over the past year has been to try to eat every single kind of fish that you sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've come a long way.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciate your time and are grateful that you spent this time with us.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it, Cindy.
All right, take care. We're now going to make our way just next door to their neighbor. And actually, when they moved from the old location to the new one, these two businesses requested to be next to each other. And so after New Starfish, one of the oldest businesses in the market is Louis Meats. And so we're seeing here a lot of different kinds of meat that they have in the case. You can get pork, you can get oxtail, you can get chicken, turkey, beef, a whole wide range of meats.
We ate a beautiful organic whole chicken we got from there.
Yeah.
Head and feet included.
Yeah, it's true. And this business, they came into the market in 1998, yeah. I think it was March of 1998, and share a lot of the same customers as New Starfish. And so they wanted to continue to be close to one another. And in terms of their background, Luis and Ramona, who do we have Felix. Okay, hey Felix, how's it going?
All right, say hi.
Hi Cindy, how are you?
It's good to see you. I was just beginning to tell the story of the family business.
Yes.
That you guys have been there since 1998, and that previously Ramona and Luis had a butcher shop on Houston Street for about a decade.
Yeah.
Oops, I think we'll get Lauren back. Oh, we got you back. Felix, what is your favorite part of being at the stall and working there?
Well, my favorite part personally is the diversity that we have in the market. Food from all around the planet, people from all around the planet, different backgrounds, and that makes a very special place and unique that you don't find everywhere else. Yeah.
And it really is a family business, right? So you have Luis and Ramona. A lot of the nephews are employed. Are you related to the family?
Yes, Ramona and Luis, they're my uncles. Yes. Ramona.
Okay. So how have the preferences for meat changed over time? Hey, there's Ramona.
Yeah, Ramona's right here.
It's good to see you. So how has the preferences for meat changed over time at the stall?
Couldn't hear that very well.
Oh, she's got.
Oh, it got really actually busier, at least 50%, busier than we usually are. I mean, you know, everybody's home cooking. And I guess they have more time to just come out and shop. Things that they haven't done before. So an
Yeah.
experience, yeah. And you see a lot of new people, right? That they just didn't know about the market.
Yeah, you guys were able,
Yeah.
you were able to grow significantly by moving into the new market space, which
yes,
is really
yes.
great.
And just, you know, it's a great space. Yeah, more space for all of us, and we can bring more products and state of the art infrastructure. You know.
Yeah, yeah, I'm curious. During the pandemic, has there been a particular kind of meat that people have been buying like crazy? Is there something that has shifted in people's habits or the meat that they're purchasing?
Well, from my experience, a lot of people don't know how to cook, right? So when they try to search for something easy, ground beef is the thing that comes up for the most part. So that's something that the sauce has increased very, very high, yeah, compared
Yeah.
to regular times, yeah.
And do you get some of your meat from Hunts Point Market?
Hunts Point, yes, Hunts Point, but that's our main distributor. We get bubble chickens from Brooklyn. They're farm raised and free range chickens that we get every day, fresh killed, and you know, as high as a product we can have.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great to have you both here, and it is, I think, a real Lower East Side love story, having Ramona and Luis, and now your whole family involved in the business. And we're just so grateful that you fed generations of people all of your delicious meat. We have 2 of your pork chops in the freezer that we're going to be making.
Great. Enjoy them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I think that as we move to the next vendor, you know, the places we've seen so far, I think it's important to highlight as well that, you know, the Essex Market is not just prepared foods, but, you know, it's also, you know, staples, it's groceries, it's fruits and vegetables, meat, fish, things like that. So people often ask, you know, is this a food hall? Like, what's the difference between a food hall and a public market? And I think that's an important part, is that, you know, so many of the vendors here are serving staples. This is a place where you can affordably do just your regular grocery shopping, as well as get, you know, some really nice prepared foods as well.
That's absolutely right. And now, I mean, so we've looked at a couple of places where you buy your groceries. There are also several different family-owned groceries. So we saw Essex Farm. There's also Viva and Luna Brothers, and these are all family-owned businesses that are providing diverse and important ingredients for different populations. Like Viva, for example, has a lot of food that people who are Dominican or Puerto Rican, or even from different Asian countries, or I mean, we shop there too. So there's so many different communities that are being served in the market. But here we're going to visit what is the newest vendor inside the market, and this is Lenin Costas. He's originally from. Hey, Lenin, thank you so much for joining us. Could you share with us a little bit about the background behind your business? I know that you started at outdoor markets like the Long Island City Flea in Queens and the Queens Night Market. How did you end up in Essex Market, and what was your concept, and how is that evolving?
All right, yeah. I'm gonna start 3 years ago in the LIC Flea Market. After that, also Queens Night Market, Bronx Night Market. So do a lot of pop-ups. But thank God, I find these amazing places as market last year. So we start selling ceviche. Now we got a new item in the menu. That's Peruvian roasted chicken. Some Peruvian flavors.
And what is those Peruvian flavors that you're talking about? So what kind of flavors is it? Spicy, or what types of flavors?
The Peruvian chicken is very special because it's a little crispy, it's a little salty, and also the most important is the skin inside. The chicken inside is very juicy. So, and we added on the side a Peruvian spicy green sauce. When you put it on the chicken, the flavor is so good.
It is, I can attest.
It's amazing.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the perfect thing, the rotisserie chicken during this time for people to come in, quickly pick up and take home and maybe make a soup later on. So we're just so thankful to you for joining us. And just to let people know, the business started out in the market as Don Ceviche, and now you've added this new menu item. And so you're transitioning, it's going to be Mercado Lima. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure, yeah. So because we start with the ceviche, because in the beginning we only do like a ceviches, like a cold dishes. But right now our menu is a little more bigger. So we got seafood, we got Peruvian hot food like seafood rice, like Peruvian Chinese fried rice called arroz chaufa. We got also like a grain bowls with quinoa with mixed green salad, with chickpeas, all roasted chicken on top. And now also we got the roasted chicken also. So yeah, we got a bigger menu now. So that's the reason, you know.
And if I can ask Lauren to kind of show us the chickens again, just because I want to make everybody watching, I want to make everybody's mouth water. And are these dishes, Lenin, that you grew up with?
You can see right now our chicken is very, you know, it's a little shiny, it's very juicy. And this is amazing chicken also. So when you try this chicken, you want to be addicted to eat every day.
That's right. Well,
we add it with the green sauce.
Yeah.
Green sauce, rice, salad. That's the best combination.
Oh, that's great. And these are like foods that you grew up with in Peru, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so. It's like made with love. It's a reflection of your past, and we're so grateful for you joining us. We need to make our way to our next stop, but thank you so much for your time, Lenin.
All right, thank you guys.
On his Facebook page on Don Ceviche.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So it's a little bit of a walk to the next vendor, so it'll just be a minute before we get there. I just wanted to touch on, we had some questions come in here. Sammy mentioned, he says, do you think it's interesting how other countries seem to be where we are in 1940, where we were in 1940 with these huge public markets? And that's interesting. It's true. You know, even when you think about American cities that have these sort of iconic markets, we didn't really have that in New York City because we stopped investing them in the late 50s and 60s. And that's when most of them were torn down. And that's when Essex Street Market started to shrink. So it just wasn't a priority for the city. But I feel like the Essex Market is now back as this really iconic food space for New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw as we were passing Formaggio Essex, you know, you have cheese vendors, you can find cured fish. Here on the left, we have beer. People can go to Top Hops and pick up some beer to go.
You can get vegan cheese. There's an all vegan cheese vendor.
Riverdale is in the market. Yep. Here we have peasant stock. Of course, it's ours are a little bit different, so you want to make sure to check the website. Here to the left, we have Puebla. This was a business that got priced out of their restaurant in the neighborhood, and they had about 30 days to decide what to do. They decided to close the restaurant, and then one of their customers told them about the Essex Market, and they were able to reopen within a couple months, albeit in the market in a different space. But this sort of illustrates why we have public markets. And the last vendor that we're visiting here today is my friend Manuel Diaz. And he runs a business called Dominican Cravings. So Manny, we are so grateful to him for joining us today. He had started out in the old market, and it's been really exciting to watch how his business has grown since he moved into this new space. So we're going to have the chance to talk to him about that. But it's really, I mean, He had worked in a bunch of different restaurants in the city and always dreamed of having his own business, selling the food that came from his cultural heritage, which is, he's originally, his family is originally from the Dominican Republic. And so, yeah, so we're going to get the chance to talk to him.
And that's exactly what Adam said sort of at the top of the program, which is that this is really a space for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Manny, how are you doing?
Doing.
It's so good to see you. And I have to say, I miss your delicious empanadas. I miss them.
I miss all of you too, all my good customers.
So we were just telling the audience that you came into the market just a few years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about the food that you specialize in and how the business has grown since you moved into the new space?
I specialize in Dominican food, Dominican traditional food. I moved in I got in business 3 years. Moved in Essex Market 2018. And the first year, it was a little hard, but now in here, I have a lot of recognition. People love my food, and I love that people love my food.
What's your favorite part of running the business these days?
You say the everyday challenge and the people that come in and appreciate the food, because that's what I got in the business, in the food business.
And you get to work with your brother and sister, right? So you.
Yes. Right now we made it a family, kind of like a family company. And we are working towards one goal: make this Dominican Cravings better, and try to open a couple of multiple spots.
It's wonderful. I mean, I remember you were working by yourself for a period with the business. And then when you moved to the new space, you were able to your brother and sister were able to join you. Could you show us show us an empanada?
Sure.
I mean, I just want to say this is one of the places in the market. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of affordable food that's there, and you can get a $2 empanada from their stall. I mean, and that's delicious. That's absolutely delicious, along with some sauce.
So what flavor is that, Manny?
That's chicken mozzarella.
Oh, how did you come up with the recipes? Are these family recipes, or are some of them just from experimenting in the kitchen?
Some of them recipes are family recipes, and some of them are my inspiration from some of the food that I ate around New York.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've really appreciated having the opportunity to visit you today and share a little bit of your story. And I mean, in normal times, your stall is just hopping. It's a place where, again, people can come and find good, wholesome, stick to your ribs food at an affordable price. And that's something that's such a service to the community. And so we thank you so much for your time. And again, everyone, it's Dominican Cravings. If you want to follow them on Instagram.
Yep.
Thank you. Follow me at Dominican Cravings NYC.
So we're now going to bring Adam on, and Lauren's going to close out her camera. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us. Adam, is there any closing kind of points, anything you'd like to share with us before we wrap up today?
Did anyone have any questions? We can start there. Were any questions come through the chat?
Yeah, so we had one question. It says, how do you see the market after COVID-19? If things get back to normal, because, obviously you mentioned that you have the social distancing. There's no seat in the market right now. So,
so as interesting as it sounds, like, because we are the city and usually wouldn't consider the city flexible, but we do have some flexibility here to at least support the vendors. Where if they were on their own with a private landlord, like, we wouldn't be, they wouldn't quite have that system. So we're here to make sure that they can be successful, throughout this process, throughout this recovery process. And, it's going to take a while. And, Lauren's going to be pivoting to doing some, online classes to make it the marketing section and the programming. But, you know, we're just here to help them and just whatever we can do to make them successful. And that's our goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an important point, that it's a nonprofit organization that's affiliated with the city of New York City Economic Development Corporation. So, you know, it's mission driven, which means that it's about supporting the community, but it's also about supporting those small businesses that are based in the market.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I want to add is, you know, like Lauren mentioned the fundraiser. So if, you know, if anyone's watching and goes to the website, Essex Market NYC, and wants to give us a couple bucks so we can help feed some seniors in the neighborhood, you know, we'd really love and appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to share the slide here so you can see. Whoops.
There we go.
There we go. All right, Adam. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And we do hope that viewers, if you have the means and can help support people in the community to get groceries from all the small businesses in the market, this is a great way to do it. Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah, thanks,
have a great
Adam.
day. We appreciate you and your team and all the vendors that came on today.
Good.
And so I guess that's where our part of the program ends, and
Yeah.
we pass it back to Dolan. We just want to thank everyone. And normally we do this in real life out in the market, and we're just so grateful to all the folks at Essex Market, as well as at the Tenement Museum, that made it possible for this to do this in a virtual way today.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was so lovely to see the market and to hear from the vendors. I'm definitely missing Essex Market up here in Queens. So just to switch gears a little bit before we conclude, I'd like to share a brief video. You're going to hear from one of my colleagues at the Tenement Museum, Francis Pena, who is a Lower East Side local and a lifelong shopper at the market.
My name is Francis Pena, and I have worked for the Tenement Museum for over 18 years. My role at the Tenement Museum is Associate Director of HR and Payroll. I was born and raised in the Lower East Side, and I continue to live in the Lower East Side. I have shopped at Essex Market all my life, and I continue to doing my shopping there. One of my favorite vendors of Essex Market is Viva Fruits and Vegetables. They have the best fruits and vegetables, and they also have everything you need for your Dominican and Puerto Rican ingredients. One of my special memories as a child of Essex Market was going shopping with my mom. There was a Jewish merchant that sold candy, and I would always go to look at all the candy, and he would come over to me and give me a candy, and that made my day. What I love about Essex Market is that it has always been a place for the community to do their shopping. They have so many different vendors with so many different kinds of food. It's such a great place to shop. It will always be a treasure for everyone in the community and for everyone in the Lower East Side. I just love Essex Market.
And that is the end of our program. The Tenement Museum would like to thank Turnstile Tours, New York City Economic Development Corporation, the Lower East Side Partnership, and of course the vendors at New Starfish, Louis Meats, Mercado Lima, and Dominican Cravings for making this program possible. We put the links to all the fundraisers to help people buy groceries in the neighborhood in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned for future Tenement Museum virtual events by signing up for our newsletter on tenement.org. Thank you so much. Have a great day.